Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Thursday, September 5th, 2024. It is noon. Is there a motion to call the meeting to order?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gentlemen, first item on the agenda, permission for town property usage. Kelsey Janik reached out to me from the Daisy Scouts. As you know, Apple Peach Fest weekend, they usually do a town-wide yard sale, and she wanted to give her Daisy Scouts an opportunity to raise some funds and asked if it was okay to use our parking lot. I personally am in full support of this. There will be plenty of adults there to control cars, parking, everything, and the Daisy Scouts will be behind tables selling various goods. All of the application is in your book here. They have insurance, they signed the indemnity waiver, and I would ask for a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
what parking lot? Town hall parking
Town hall
lot?
parking lot.
Okay. I don't see any problem in it. Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Moving on to purpose of this meeting, town meeting warrant review. All right, gentlemen, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to speak up. I'm going to run through these just so we can see. Article 1, to see if the town will raise and appropriate or otherwise provide for a transfer from available funds of the total sum of $6,278.10 to pay bills from prior fiscal years or take any other action thereon or in relation thereto. We have 2 bills from the police department for WB Mason, one for $175.13, another for $12.97, and we have peer review fees from the Conservation Commission for Conoco Engineers in the amount of $6,090 for a total of $6,278.10.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Gasper.
peer review fees from conservation, isn't that usually covered by the applicant?
Yeah, these were not, Conoco performed the services. The person who is representing the Conservation Commission asked Conoco to do the work for the town. They provided the service. We were billed as part of the MS4. I did not think that this was proper in that invoice. We have since got a separate invoice for this. It's prior to this present administration in the Concom.
Okay.
I agree with you, peer review should have been billed, but this individual went above and beyond on using Conoco.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Article 2, to see if the town will raise and appropriate or otherwise provide for a transfer from available funds to fund amended amounts in various accounts that were previously voted in Article 25 of the June 17, 2024 annual town meeting for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024, or take any other action thereon or in relation thereto. This would be a transfer from line item 1141, the Assessors Department, to line item number 1192 for town buildings, the amount of $9,500.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Gasser.
I don't understand why the article's still written to see if we will vote to raise and appropriate. The money's been raised and appropriated already. It's just a simple transfer from one account to another account.
Agreed.
So the article should just be, see if the town will transfer, not raise and appropriate.
It can be redrafted that way. The motion, which you see below, it votes to amend by transferring.
Mr. Kelly, if you could just make the article match the motion, I think that'll work. Article 3, to see if the town will vote to transfer from the unused balances of the capital projects identified below the sum of undeclared for the capital project stated below, and anything incidental or related thereto, including but not limited to undeclared, or take any other action in relation thereto. This is to close out prior year capital articles and return the monies to the general fund. Correct, Mr. Kelly?
Yes, and we have a meeting with the schools this afternoon, and that's going to be one of the issues we bring up. There's very little money in the town articles that can be transferred. There's a couple thousand. There's 125,000 unused in the school articles that are old. And we are, as you know, meeting with the business manager of the school to see where that stands. It's
Yep.
I would not want to move some of the town monies because if a repair of the COA and the Parting Ways buildings, and we've got to do those projects. And I've talked to the IT folks, and they would rather we did not at this point move the IT money, that we wait until the spring to do that.
Sure.
But as I said, there's about 125,000 of school money that has yet to be touched, that goes back to, for a number of years.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Gasper.
you're gonna have a conversation with the school department. I know that on those outstanding articles that they hold, there's some paving there that we've done some paving already in prior years for the parking lot out back on the Ford Middle School. And there's significant money there as well for roof repairs. And as everybody knows, we just put a new school roof on the Acushnet Elementary School, so those would be the two bigger ones that are in the account that you should have a conversation and dialogue with them.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to accept and expend any fair share amendment funds that may be available from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation for construction improvements and/or reconstruction of public ways and associated equipment, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into contract relative thereto, and to appropriate said sum or sums in anticipation of reimbursement from the Commonwealth, or take any other action thereon or in relation thereto. This one's pretty straightforward. Essentially, Massachusetts says we have a portion of this fair share amendment, and once again, the Board of Selectmen does have the authority to decide where that money is spent. This is just giving us permission to do so.
This is very similar to the Chapter 90 article, and I would suggest in the future we put it in the consent agenda.
Sure.
Articles in the annual town meeting.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I would also like to have the board's permission in the future for both articles to include the fact that all projects must be approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Absolutely.
As it stands right now, all Chapter 90 has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen. This fair share amendment, I would believe, would fall in that same category. I agree that it should just, I don't know if we do this one particular time with this individual article, and if we could merge the two together in future, so it's one article explaining that we have the right to expend Chapter 90 and fair share amendment to make it one article instead of having, two articles. If we could merge it into one after this first existing one passes, we just merge the Fair Share Act into the Chapter 90 funds and make one article to expend funds. That'd probably work out better.
But I do request having the selectmen have approval because it's not specific
I
in
agree.
this one.
Yep, I agree.
It's a good idea. Just put it in writing, make it locked in.
Correct.
Next article is Article 5, to see if the town will vote to transfer from the Stormwater Management MS4 Stabilization Fund for the cost of services in fiscal year 2024 for compliance with the general permit for discharges from the municipal separate stormwater system, the sum of $47,818. Take any other action thereon or in relation thereto.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Gasper.
so my first question is, I believe the total amount in this MS4 stabilization fund is $50,000,
77.
$77,000?
And I would ask the board, because in our review of old articles, Judy and I found an article of upwards of $35,000 that we think can pay part of this bill. So we would only be asking for the difference.
The article from 5/2023 actually has $50,000 remaining in that article for MS4 engineering. There's an outstanding article for $50,000 for MS4 engineering.
This-
However, if because we need to continue doing things, expenditures with MS4, I think taking it out of the stabilization is probably the only bet, because we have no other expenditure way to pay for MS4 engineering, which is the town's permitting, right?
As of this morning, Judy reported we have 35,000 in an article we can use, and then the
That
balance would be the stabilization fund.
I think that $35,000 that you're talking about is from the Board of Health for consulting fees. There's $35,000 in that one. That's not MS4 engineering. So we'll look at that list of old
okay.
articles, but I know there's one outstanding for $35,000 for consulting fees from the Board of Health as well. And there's $50,000 for an MS4.
Yeah, spring annual town meeting 523, Article 24, MS4 engineering, $50,000.
That is correct. That is Article 24. So, neither here or there.
Yep.
We got that money approved to spend on our MS4 permitting, the town side. We need that money, right? So we can't deplete, we'd only have $2,200 left over if we use that article. So the best thing to do is get town meeting approval from the stabilization fund.
Yep.
This is also a prior year mishap, I would guess, that we didn't pay a bill.
No, it's the bill for 24 that was for MS4 for that year.
Right, but that should have been captured earlier on,
Yeah.
right? And it hasn't been, because we had an opportunity to pay out of free cash or whatever we wanted to at town meeting in the spring that just went by. We just got out of town meeting in June.
Yeah, we didn't receive it until after that.
That big of a bill? Wow.
Well, and that's part of the bill that I refused and sent back because of the,
So accumulation of this practice has happened throughout the year, and then we finally got caught up to it, right? That's what you're alluding to.
yeah. And
Okay.
it was billed originally to the Conservation Commission, and it was billed a couple places.
Right.
Everywhere but where it should have been.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Article 6, amend Charter, Section 3-1-2.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Woman.
the board asked me to work with Mr. Kelly and town council. I got some questions about this before we present it or discuss it, so maybe we can hold it off until the next
Sure.
open meeting on the 10th.
Yep. Yeah, I know there's a couple of choices and some waiting periods, so, yeah, if you want to talk to town council and narrow down your questions, absolutely. All right. Article 7, to see if the town will vote to approve by funding the necessary cost items contained in the initial years of a memorandum of agreement that amends the 3-year collective bargaining agreement between the Massachusetts Laborers District Council, Public Employees Local Union 1249, July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2027, and that the town raise and appropriate or otherwise provide for a transfer from available funds the amount of $19,775 to fund the cost of the MOA or take any other action thereon. This is
This is a placeholder.
DPW.
This is a placeholder if the DPW contract is settled.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Gasper.
I appreciate the article being there. I was gonna speak with Mr. Kelly. I believe that Mr. Kelly and I have met with the DPW union, and I believe that we have an agreement. So it would need to be presented to the board for ratification, so I would ask for an executive session Tuesday night to discuss quickly
Sure.
on this contract.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Article 8, to see if the town will vote to amend Article 6 Soil Conservation Bylaw of the general bylaws by deleting Section 3A.7. Where resultant transportation of materials in excess of the federal truck weight limits of 80,000 pounds or take any other action in relation thereto. This is some cleanup of our soil bylaw. I think it's extremely necessary to remove this. There's a lot of variables that come into play here in relation to multiple other companies that this restricts. So this is just a little cleanup. I think it's necessary.
How does this impact, weren't we going through the, like, with Keating and all that stuff, or how does this impact like South Main Street and the town,
So-
state on the road, or?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The weight limit was put in from a previous individual into the bylaw at 80,000 pounds. The problem with it is it's that 80,000 pound weight limit for large trucks is only in the soil conservation bylaw and not in the general bylaws. So at that point, it would be considered discrimination against one company versus other companies. So unless and until it was put in a general bylaw, if that's what the townspeople would want, which I wouldn't be recommended because we have other businesses throughout the town that carry in excess loads of 80,000 pounds. So the town council has, through work with myself on the soil board, has made a recommendation that it should be removed, the weight limit for that soil conservation bylaw.
Yeah.
And this would default to the DOT regs.
Yep. In other words, if this was in a general bylaw, you wouldn't be able to get gas trucks in our town.
Correct.
So, makes sense. Article 9, funding school roof ban repayment from the Special Capital Expenditure Fund from solar tax revenue, Chapter 110 of the Acts of 2013. To see if the town will vote to transfer from the Special Capital Expenditure Fund from solar tax revenue, Chapter 110 of the Acts of 2013, the sum of $550,000, or take any other action thereon or in relation thereto. This is what we all agree on, essentially, gentlemen, paying off debt as quick as we can. And by doing this, you reduce the debt held on the ban, reduces the interest payments, and saves the taxpayers of Acushnet money over time. Clear the debt as soon as we can.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Gasper.
So, I know Mr. Kelly gave me some new information regarding solar revenue, but I mean, if, depending on what we come up with for dissolving past articles, in the onset of this discussion on the school roof, around roughly 50% of that school roof was somewhere in the realm of 1.3, and right now I think we owe $960,000 roughly on the band. The preliminary discussions way back when, before Mr. Kelly's time, was to use free cash and this capital fund from solar revenue to pay down that debt. So I don't know if there's what we'll have in dissolving articles, but you could take some of that money as well and put it on top of this payment if that's the pleasure of the board. Not saying it has to be done right now. The way it looks is we'll be sitting on roughly $415,000 left of debt from a 1.3 million, right?
Yep.
Which wasn't put as a debt exclusion on the taxpayers of Acushnet, so kudos to the Board of Selectmen. But, you know, the faster we get this debt paid down, we're looking at other articles coming up, and that involves debt. So it's just an idea to be floated out there for discussion for Tuesday night.
Yep, it's a good idea, once we dive through this full list here too, and we have a
It
idea of the
also,
totals.
how much you do the repayment, you still are gonna have to roll the ban over in the fall.
Yep.
And when you roll it over, you remember a ban is only interest-only payment, not principal payment. So when you have a choice in the spring of using free cash prior to the next rollover to erase the debt.
Yep.
So question, so if we make these large payments,
Yep.
right, we'll still have, I don't want to say small, but a relatively small leftover, right, payment.
Balance.
Balance, that's what we're looking for, balance. And could we determine what a yearly expenditure would be to pay that down? Because then, if it's a relatively manageable balance, maybe that's something that the school department absorbs as part of their operating budget.
Right now, I think, Mr. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a little while since I've looked at the numbers, and I don't have my recap sheet with me, but I believe right now, just the interest that we've been paying on a yearly basis is roughly $63,000 in interest only, right? So that's the idea. We pay this chunk down. I'm gonna assume that if we take off half that debt, we'll be paying somewhere in the realm of $35,000 in interest now. The next ban that we're eligible for, I believe it's November or late October. That's why Mr. Kelly and I had the conversation, is let's get an article on so we can use that solar revenue to crack that nut down, right? Because we're basically, essentially just taking $63,000 every year and out, and that's not really a great idea, right?
Understood, but I look at it as where, with what projects we have on board, coming on board, I would love nothing more than to expire this debt, but if the Board of Selectmen were able to turn over a small portion for the school department and say, hey, we've done our best, this is, on you now to retire this debt, and, maybe that's an option. Again, I'm not saying that is the option,
Right.
but at least should be part of the conversation.
Agreed.
The debt line in the budget is independent. It's one of the joint lines of both school and
The town.
town, similar to the insurance.
Understood.
So if you want to divide it, you can. Usually the debt line, though, is in a separate section of the budget.
Again, conversation for down the road, but
I
I think
understand.
if we were able to take care of 2/3 or more than that of the project, I think that's a pretty good deal for not only the taxpayer, but also for the school department as well.
Yep. Article 10, authorization for an extended school transportation contract. To see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to enter in a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options commencing on July 1st, 2024 with a qualified vendor for the provisions of bus transportation for students within grades kindergarten through grade 8 attending Acushnet Public Schools in the town of Acushnet and contracted sending high schools. Subject to the select board's determination, the contract is in the best interest of the town and subject annually to town meeting approval for funding these services or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but this would still keep the 3-year contract.
They
But
they
give
are
us the
in
option for 4 and
they
5.
are in a 3-year contract right now. The first year, there is a contingency in the contract to allow them to extend it for the 5-year, year by year. I think in our discussion with the schools, we should find out what the savings would be, the 3 versus 4 versus 5.
Yep.
I do not have that. Other than that, it's not an unusual situation for various school departments to try to get a set fee rather than gamble on after the 3-year contract going out
Going out to bid.
and getting a higher one, considering that the bus companies usually
Unofficially.
Arrange the distribution of the contracts district by district.
Do we know with the bus company we're using, like what the fleet is made up of? Is it made up of electric, gas,
Yeah.
right? So I think it'd be good to know, because I read articles. Fall River, they got a fleet of electric buses. New Bedford, they're using electric buses. I'm not saying that's the only option, but if there are kickers in here about, I'm assuming tied to gas prices and stuff like that, you know, what are they doing? I'd like to know more about what they're using, what they're doing, what their game plan is, you know, what the contract looks like. Is it taking into account gas prices, and there's an automatic kicker in there for increased gas prices, but gas prices fluctuate. You know, I've seen it in other industries where there's, you know, contracts based on gas prices, but then gas prices go down, but nobody's given the rebate. There's no rebate there.
No
right?
rebate.
Good point, we just got kicked by Waste Management, right? Got a fuel surcharge in there, right? And that's part of their contract, is the fuel surcharge, and it was a significant amount of money, I believe. It wasn't small change, and I think, I mean, Mr. Kelly just said what I wanted to know, right? Is I want to know what the cost savings is between a 3-year and a 5-year, if there's any, right? And then you got to look at what kind of escalators are in the current contract, what's projected in future contracts, i.e. what Selectman Warner just talked about, fuel surcharge, right? And that's an escalator, right? You're gonna see what that's all about. I mean, electric's gone through the roof. If you talk to anybody about their home electric bill right now, so, you know, the whole going green thing is, you know, going red, really. But are there options, right? Are there other options? I don't know, and I think it's all worth exploring, as Selectman Warner alluded to, is everything's gonna be on the table nowadays, especially with funding, limited funding that we have. And I think everybody needs to really take deep dives into what they're looking at in their expense lines, right? And say, enough is enough. You gotta figure it out. But I mean, if it's not in the interest of, you know, peanuts and savings from a 3-year, 5-year, you gotta look at the details, are in the devil's in the details, right? What are you doing by going in an extra couple of years, right? That's a problem. So it really needs to be vetted out, and I can't believe that we're sitting here, you know, less than 30 days away from town meeting and we don't have any details. Hopefully we have some Tuesday night.
My goal today after this meeting, when I sit down with the business manager and members of the school committee, is to get as much information on the next
Also, Mr. Chairman,
3 articles here, to get, well, 4 articles technically, to get as much information as possible, so by Tuesday you'll have all the information you need.
I mean, one other, on this bus transportation stuff, and I want to say we've asked the question, but maybe just while you're in conversations, have they explored a user fee? Well, I am not into lopping on fees to people. That's why this board has resisted a trash fee for a million years and then some, but bus transportation, everybody takes a bus. Some people do, some people don't. When your kids cycle out of school, you're done with that service, right? So I think we're just going to look at every option possible. Unless it's illegal, unless there's some...
There is a state, the state mandates that within or without a certain mileage, you have to provide transportation.
And I think it's also by age. The state dictates that, right? But there is that.
Ask for the reg, so I don't have to ask the question again. So you can either shut me up or we can...
I believe you're right, when you mentioned, has it been brought up? It was actually brought up before Springtown meeting last year in budget sessions with them. But once again, it was a, hey, have you looked into this? And
Right.
that was the end of the discussion, so.
Transportation, what do we pay now, 1.4 million? Transportate for the school?
If you remember,
It's gotta be
we
more than
did
that.
not get a copy of the school budget until the day of town meeting.
So if you look at it, in the past, transportation for the school department has always been broken out into a separate budget, as it should always be, right? And back in the day, I remember that number, and let's just talk 5 or 7 years ago, that number was roughly $1.3 million. So I just used, what, 1.4? And that's probably low,
That's what I'm worried
right?
about.
So there was always presented to town meeting, when we presented detailed budgets, there's always a separate one. And I can demonstrate that by looking at a past book from town meeting, that we always kept that broken out. It's a significant amount of money for transportation. And it's just, it's I drive by the school sometimes, right, and there's tons of parents. I mean, the line is just, but Mr. Hinckley, I think I've seen
I sit in the
your
line.
car inside of the line, right? You can't miss the big blue car, right? And there's just, I don't know how, 7,500s, whatever it may be, but it's all the way down, almost to the middle school, picking up at the
What's
elementary
the
school.
ridership like?
I just can't believe how many people are actually picking up their children from the school, the elementary school, right?
I know there is some regulations involving how many students are on the bus, how many buses you need to have for people that actively use the bus. I don't know those figures off the top of my head.
It's maximum numbers, it's not minimum numbers using the bus.
Yeah.
That's the problem. You could have a bus that has one person on it.
Yeah, I know that in the past they've got issues too with, they send out a survey every year. If you're taking the bus, fill out the survey so you know where your stop is, you know what time the bus shows up. And I know they've had issues in the past where people say, yes, we're gonna take the bus, and then they don't take the bus. So it skews their numbers sometimes where they, I believe a couple years ago, it actually caused them to get another bus put on a new route because of it. So there's definitely a possibility to see and reevaluate if we have too many bus routes.
Too big of buses? They sell smaller buses. Right? Fuel costs, right? Just
Yeah.
think about that, right? I mean, if you got a school bus that can hold, let's just arbitrarily speak, that a school bus can hold 60 students, and if you only have 15 or 20 on a bus, then why am I shipping one of those big buses out of the school department every day? I mean, they gotta look at that count, right? And say, hey, they make the smaller ones that might hold 30 students, 20 students, whatever it is. I mean, I don't know if we need a fleet of, 60-foot long school buses cranking around town. I don't know. That's for the school to figure out.
Yep.
But it's all part of cost, right?
Yep. We'll have some options. I got some questions for them when we meet, so
Excellent.
I'll get the answers. Article 11, to see if the town will vote under the provisions of general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 40, Section 13E, on any amendments thereto to transfer funds from the School Special Education Reserve Fund to the fiscal year 25 Acushnet School Department to be utilized to pay without further appropriation for unanticipated or unbudgeted costs of special education and recovery high school programs, out-of-district tuition or transportation, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Kelly, I've had multiple conversations with you, and
Originally,
I got an
this-
email this morning that kind of contradicted what this is for.
Originally, the school was not pushing for this article. It's been in on the warrant and annual town meeting. Subsequent to us developing the warrant, if you remember, they kept working on the school budget, and we didn't have final figures until right at the end. And according to school business manager, they need access to this to balance their budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Gasper.
this is extremely dangerous, in my opinion, with trying to use a stabilization, free cash, whatever you want to call it. In this case, it's a stabilization account fund, right? And I know it's there for a reason, but in the amount of $189,000, that means when you take one-time revenue and do it for this budget year, substitute this budget year, what you're doing is creating a structural deficit in the next budget season. So right out of the gate, they're coming in with a structural deficit of $190,000 for next year's budget, right? This is a kill to taxation. $200,000, $190,000, let's just call it, is a huge hit to the people that pay taxes in this town. Tax bills have already gone up enough. And I mean, what are we doing? You presented a budget, and I know things are unanticipated when it comes to this exact situation, but there's got to be a different way for them to absorb from their budget. We're setting ourselves up for failure financially going into this next budget season with a structural deficit of $190,000 right out of the gate. Their budget's going up $190,000. This is not going away. This is being used. There's not a significant, how much money's in this account?
$329,450.
So you would think that the school has that flexibility to say, hey, we were off on this and, we need $30,000, $50,000. That was always my interpretation of this. It's not, hey, oh my God, we underfunded our budget and here we are, I need $200,000. I mean, I don't understand how that happens. In my opinion, it's unacceptable to ask for us to add this to taxation, because that's exactly what's gonna occur. And it's a big hit. It's, if I had to do the calculation, I'm gonna say it's anywhere between 12 and 15 cents per thousand on taxation. That's a big hit for people, right?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
question to Mr. Kelly. So this article, is this just give them the authority to do this? Right?
Well,
This
they'll
ar-
do it.
No, I'm saying they, explain the article.
It authorizes them to take money out of their sped
Right, so it's giving them an
stabilization.
authority, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so the question I have is, could we amend it?
They have the authority on, town meeting and the school committee have the authority on this
Right, could-
stabilization fund.
So could it be amended to, say, to withdraw funds not to exceed a certain amount? Like if we put in, say, $30,000. So put a cap.
Yeah,
So it.
you could do it, but typically it's used if someone moves into the district and they need out-of-district placement for sped and transportation. That's an unintended
Understood.
expense,
But if-
and that's what this is typically used for.
But if there's a cap embedded, and that you have to exceed that cap, then that would require
A town meeting
town meeting
vote.
vote and amendment. I'm
But
just saying, that there's a way to put some belts and suspenders to avoid the scenario that Mr. Gasper has just suggested.
So here's where the scenario gets a little muddy. According to the email I got this morning, this money was represented already in the FY25 budget that was approved at town meeting in the spring. So the budget that we received and voted on,
The up $335,000 budget?
the last budget that was actually, the operating budget that was voted on at spring town meeting included this money, according to the email that I got this morning.
What do you mean? That's not the
According-
case, because
according to
they used it
it
to
can't be
balance.
incorporated.
They
in.
used it to balance their budget, is what the bottom line is.
God. So, anyways, there's so many things going on, right? So I'm just gonna. I think there's other ways within the school department that they could be paying this down, right? So they have 2 academic coaches. I've talked to a lot of teachers. Most of them have to require master's degrees. What do we have academic coaches for? We don't have coaches for any other staff other than teachers. If they have master's degrees, should they really be coached by anybody? And if you're doing that miserable of a job where you're failing the students, should you really be a teacher, right? So there's so many different things. They got a curriculum director in a small school district like this. I believe that should be the superintendent's job. They got IT people. How many IT people do they have? I think it's 3 or 4. Do they need 3 or 4 people in IT for a small school district? What are these people doing on a day-to-day basis? I mean, there's so many different areas that you could be looking at within the budget and saying, enough is enough. I don't think we need all of these people just, monitoring and babysitting for IT things. I mean, come on, most you need is 2 people. I mean, how many things are really going wrong on a daily basis to be paying people these kind of salaries, just sitting around and going, I'm just waiting for something to happen. And again, the academic coaches, it blows my mind. You're spending $250,000 roughly on academic coaches. We're not school teachers, the hardworking people that they are doing the best they can. If there's a problem, the superintendent, principals, whoever else needs staff needs to step in and address the problem, not have coaches that sit there and tell a teacher what they need to do. They got a master's degree in most cases, right? I mean, I've talked to a lot of school teachers. I'm friendly with a lot of school teachers. It just blows my mind that this is where money's being spent, and then you're asking for 189. I think it could be absorbed into the school's budget already. Everybody keeps coming with these exorbitant requests. I mean, I talked about this before when I was chairman, when we were going through the budget, right? The town only has so much capacity for revenue, right? It's basically new growth, Prop 2.5 levy increase. This year that just went by, we raised $543,000 in Prop 2.5, and we originally came in with a lower number for new growth. It was like
200.
well, we used 20 or something like that, but that was up in when we were solving the budget deficit. You basically got $800,000 without other little revenue things that you can play around with, right? And Mr. Kelly and I had to raise some of those revenue lines to make a balanced budget based on everybody's thing. But you know, we had Old Colony up 400 and a quarter. We had the schools coming in 335. Now you add back in this 200. Now you're 535. This goes all your Prop 2.5 levy just to one school department, right? People got to start looking at things and saying, this is the definition of insanity. You just take the two schools and you've wiped out everything, all the revenue I just talked about, you just wiped it all out, and there's nothing left for public safety and administration costs. I mean, and health insurance and pensions and everything else. I mean, we're spending on average $1.4 million year over year. When's that trend going to stop? It's not sustainable. What we've been spending, and I got the history over the last, I think it's 10 or 15 years of what our budget's been up, and it's roughly averages out to $1.4 million. What are we doing? We can't stay on that trend. Think about that. 10 years, that's another $15 million. That's like 45% of what we're currently spending in just 10 short years from now. That's what we're telling the people, right? Don't worry, just keep giving us more money. Everybody knows they're gonna pay a little bit more in taxes every year to keep operations going, but when you're whacking the snot out of people, you're kicking people out of our community, you're kicking people out of their homes. It's not right. We represent all levels of income, low income, medium income, and high earning income people, right? It's not just one class, high earning people where they can afford to pay more in taxation. We're just crushing our residents. It's not fair.
No.
I'm trying to speak for everybody. You know, all classes of income in the town of Acushnet. And I've seen people be forced out of this town, and it crushes my heart to continue watching it and listen to the people's story, how they can't afford to live in town anymore. It's unacceptable, and this is madness is what we're doing. I just think that they got to look at their budget and stop pulling the wool over people's eyes and say, you know what, maybe we don't need one of these coaches or, you know, all these IT people or the curriculum director for a small district like we are. And I can't even fathom where we're going, but that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, and something's gonna break, and that's the problem. Ultimately, and I want to be very clear, this board, and I speak for myself, but I know this board appreciates education, and we want to make sure that the students of Acushnet have the best education they can get. But there's a level of responsibility that we have where we need to make sure that it's sustainable, because you can't keep doing this, like you said, Mr. Gasper, and expect something not to break in the future. And we don't represent just the students in this town, we represent every single taxpayer in this town. And we have to be honest, and we have to look at things with a very clear mind and have all the facts in front of us. So part of my meeting today, once again, will be to get more facts out of this. And once I get that, I will share them with both of you through Mr. Kelly, of course.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
Make no
Gaspar.
mistake about it. I think you just said it the best. For everybody at home, make no mistake about it. I am 100% for education and our children, right? We all are. I mean, we're all compassionate about that. A great education, we need a great education, but great education doesn't mean continue giving me $1 million a year, and the outcome in 3 years, you realize that $1 million a year didn't make our students any smarter, right? That's my problem. Is at least if you were spending money and you were coming in going, look at this is the progression of our Acushnet schools, graduating from Acushnet schools, blah da 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 da. It's paying off. Just it's bearing fruit from the tree. That's one thing. We all want great education for our students. End of story. That's not the conversation I'm trying to have. What I'm trying to have is let's stop just throwing money at it, creating positions that aren't warranted. We don't do it on our side of town. Some of them may be warranted, but I'm sure I could go into that department and I could look at different people and positions, and people are just, they're not, for the money they're getting paid, it's just not warranted. And I've heard from a number of school teachers from our local schools and other schools as well. They've shared their experience on it with me, so it's not like I'm talking out of my butt.
Well, things may change dramatically if the MCAS is repealed at the ballot, which it should be, I hope it is. And, so much curriculum is designed and developed towards the MCAS. Hopefully this, if it is repealed, it'll free up the teachers and the superintendent and the principals to teach, how they've been taught to teach versus teaching to a test.
That's right, Selectman Warren. I think we talked about it several years back. I know we did. I know I brought it up about the curriculum, the expensive curriculum. Why are we changing curriculum every 2 or 3 years, man? I was having a conversation with somebody that said, remember when we were in school, we were using books from, my older brother and my older sister, and, they were there in existence for 10, 15 years. Curriculum wasn't changing, and our generation turned out pretty damn well, right? I mean, you look at the problems that are in the education department now, it's probably because you're changing curriculum constantly and wasting money doing so. It doesn't make any sense. Why are we teaching kids certain things when we should be focused on the essentials of teaching in classes, right? I mean, I just heard from a parent in the local schools, we got a humanity class now. What is that all about? I have no idea what these things are. I mean, what are we doing in the school system today? I mean, get back to the basics, right? Math, English, science, reading. It's all the basic stuff. You give them textbooks and let them learn from there. I mean, we don't need to be putting computer screens and exposing our children, in the young grades to computer screens all freaking day long. I'm sorry. It's don't warrant it. Give them a book. Let them learn how to read. Let them learn how to write. I mean, some of these kids, they don't even know how to write. I mean, it's appalling to me that our children can't write. And we're worried about curriculum and spending $500,000 on curriculum every other year or whatever to rewrite curriculum. Give me a break already.
I think a lot of that, just for some clarification too, I think a lot of that comes from the state level. And I don't want to hold our school system accountable necessarily for something that's dictated by the state.
No, I get it.
I agree. I mean, as somebody that has 2 children in the Acushnet school system, they do get a good education and they do use computers. But I also make sure, as a parent myself, I make sure my kids are picking up books, picking up textbooks and reading. But you're right, if the focus isn't put towards that, not every parent's the same, not every parent has the time to sit down and focus on education. And when I'm married to an educator, it's a little bit of a different situation for me.
Right.
But I agree, and I think a deep dive, the sad part is I think it's a deep dive that has to happen on the state level.
Absolutely. It starts with the state, right? The Department of Education.
Yep.
And to all you school teachers, while we're on this conversation, God bless you and thank you very much for what you do every day with our students.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, next 2 articles, Articles 12 and Articles 13, involve a contract with a company to essentially enter into a energy management service and also to make some capital improvements to the school. There's a lot of information that we're still getting that I actually just received some emails on within the last day or 2 that I am going over with a member of the school committee and with the business manager of the school. Because I don't have all the information or time to digest it, I don't know if you want to pass over these and just keep these here until we can speak about them on the 10th. I think there's far too much information that both of you would need to digest before you even think about reviewing these today. Basically, there's a full 2-page email with a brief synopsis, but there's a lot of details and there's a lot of dates leading up to town meeting where we won't actually see the final report from this company until the day of town meeting. So I think there's some more information that needs to be had for both of you to be able to make an educated decision. I'm going to get as much as I can today at our meeting with Mr. Kelly and the school, and we'll make sure it's prepared. I have asked Sydney and Tanya to forward you some emails that I've got from them, simply just so you can see the preliminary stuff. I know they were shared with FinCom as well, just so we can have an idea, but because of the cost of this, it's definitely something that we need to make a very, very educated decision on. and I'd like to be very, very clear, in no way is the select board hindering these two articles. We have a responsibility both fiscally and, let's just call it common sense, to make sure that we have all the details possible before we put something forward. We owe that to the taxpayers of the town of Acushnet, and if we make a bad decision because we didn't do our due diligence, that reflects poorly on all of us, not to mention everybody else in this town. I've had some people reach out to me specifically asking why it's a possibility that this is being blocked from this warrant. I will hands down deny that. This is not being blocked by the Board of Selectmen. This is being reviewed by the Board of Selectmen, which is our job. And I hope you guys agree with me.
I 100% message.
There's a lot of stuff to digest here in such a short amount of time. So, with that being said, if you guys are willing to hold off on Articles 12 and 13 until Tuesday's meeting, I will get you as many answers as I can today and share them with you this weekend.
That'd be great.
Through Mr. Kelly, of course.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Gasper.
I appreciate what you're doing with Mr. Kelly and the school department and getting more clarity on those items because they are big ticket items, right? And I don't know who's making accusations about the Board of Selectmen trying to block anything. This is the first time that we've even seen these articles on paper form, right? There was some preliminary discussions Mr. Kelly's had with me and myself anyways about the school looking for some expenditures for the schools and things of the like, but there was never any detail in those conversations, no further discussions. I never had discussions with anybody, so again, the hearsay, rumor mill, whatever you want to call it, the chat mill, whatever you're saying is wrong about the Board of Selectmen, right? This is what this process is about, and I would like to take the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to say thank you to you to schedule this meeting, preliminary meeting to review the warrant prior to Tuesday night when we're in regular session with other discussions that we have to have in Selectmen's meetings to give us an idea of what will be presented to the board. So thank you very much for taking that initiative and getting this in front of us so we have at least a weekend to digest the information. And I do want to add one more thing is that I know there was a request from fire and none of the articles are in this warrant. So I don't know what happened to that, but I know the request was made.
Yep.
And I believe it's the Board of Selectmen's job to look at everyone, all our department heads have the ability to submit articles, right? It's our job to determine what goes on the warrant and what doesn't go on the warrant.
Yep.
So I would like, as you, the chairman, to at least reach out to the fire chief and see what the deal is with what he was requesting.
Absolutely. Yep. Any announcements, gentlemen?
I do not.
No, we got Apple Peach this weekend.
Yep.
Yep.
Do we have a ride?
Possible.
Some Boucher.
As long as it's not raining, Dr. Boucher said he'd be willing to participate.
All right, thank you.
I think we're good.
If it's raining,
The
we'll
weather
take a fire
looks
truck.
like it's changed, Mr. Boucher, from the last time you and I had a conversation, so that's the good news, right? I don't want to have my umbrella in a convertible.
That's right.
Sunday's looking better.
But it is, the weather has turned around thankfully for the Apple Peach Festival, so, Sunday morning parade, what time's that fire off?
Load-in's at 9:30, parade kicks off at 10 from Polk Park.
All right,
EMA is gonna be shutting the road down as we go, and we'll end up at the festival grounds.
Can we bring, we're gonna remember to have those magnet
Yep.
things?
Just remind Sydney before we leave, just in case she has them stored somewhere.
so everybody out there that's not a Mr. Warner's reminded us that, because they got so many things going on, Apple Peach Festival this weekend, just be mindful of that and make sure when you're driving through town, you're extra careful because there are a lot of people that do yard sales, have farm stands out front, so just please be careful driving down the main drags, watch out for pedestrians, and thank you.
Excellent. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.